Allen. Thank you for logging in and attending the NBPLA first HBCU Care Summit. Today I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our guest for this morning session, Dr. Tony Allen. Dr. Tony Allen has served as president of Delaware State University since January of 2020, starting his career as a speechwriter for U.S. Senator Joe Biden. Was recently tapped as president to chair the White House HBCU Board of Advisors from the president, Joe Biden. So with that, I'll introduce to you our special guest, Dr. Tony Allen. Welcome.
Thank you, Brother Jones. This is an incredible honor for me. To all of you students, thank you for getting up and recognizing the importance of this moment. I wanted to start a little bit more personally. I am a first generation college student whose father never finished the 11th grade. So I get my experience and desire to help as I have been helped earnestly. And I think you all know that there's an old biblical adage that says, to whom much is given, much is required. I feel like I've been given much. And I know that many of you across the HBCU community feel the same. And I often get to talk to students, as you might imagine, and tell them that it is not just about you becoming exceptional professionals in your discipline. It's really about becoming exceptional citizens and having the understanding that you all need to give back. You all need to open a door. You all need to facilitate real change for others who look like you look, come from where you come from, and want a better lives for themselves, their families, and your communities. That may seem pretty heady for some of the students on this call, but it's no less important. Ours is a burden of significant responsibility. As we think about where we are as an HBCU community, think about this. For almost 2 centuries, HBCUs have continued to be the best return on investment in higher education. Today, 50% of all Black professionals got their undergraduate degree at an HBCU today. When you think about our percentage in the marketplace, we only represent about 3% of all colleges and universities in the country, and we're still graduating nearly 20% of all Black graduates. That's important. Probably more important now than it ever has been before, for a couple of reasons. One is one pandemic, as I have said many times, revealed another. So while we were all at home, couldn't go many places, looking for direction, worried about our families, the likes of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and many others came to the fore in a way that people could not look away. And as I think you know, for many years, too many folks from all different colors and backgrounds looked away. The fact that they couldn't look away this time, I believe, has changed the narrative, or at least created a window of opportunity for us. And I think what you've seen over the last 18 months is that HBCUs have raised their profile, built capacity, had an opportunity for us specifically with prospective students to think about why they would come to an HBCU in the first place, and really understand why we are the predominant generator of Black leaders in America. That's an important piece for us. When I think about the National Professional Association of Black Lobbyists, I actually think about how many of us have the opportunity to make change at the highest level in every field of human endeavor, and particularly at the policy level at such a time as this. I think you all know that in addition to my being the president of Delaware State University, which is celebrating its 130th year today, I'm very humbled and honored to be the chair of the President's Board of Advisors on HBCUs. I've known the president now for about 25 years, and as Brother Jones said, I used to work for him. In fact, his son, who has since passed away, was one of my dearest friends. But I know that that particular relationship, while important, is not enough for us to take advantage of all the opportunities in front of us today. At the Board of Advisors, we have 4 priorities. The first is building physical infrastructure at HBCUs. That means getting our fair share to make sure that our living and learning communities are on par, if not better, than many of the PWIs in this country. I don't know about you, but with respect to our residence halls, our academic buildings, our research labs, too often we don't get our fair share to make sure that we are being competitive in the marketplace. That's an important piece for us because we already do the care and concern part well. We already do you can see yourself in whatever field you so choose in our professors, faculty, and staff well. But we have to have the living and learning spaces that matter and make us competitive in the marketplace. Second, our opportunity to engage with the federal government is significant. And we've been saying this since the Carter administration, when the White House Initiative on HBCUs was first formed. But I can tell you now that there are 3 classifications of what you would call comprehensive research institutions: Research 1, Research 2, and Research 3. The Research 1 classification is the highest. Of the 101 HBCUs in the country, there is no Research 1 classification that is an HBCU. Even though we provide significant research in every field that matters in the marketplace, not only in the United States, but throughout the world, we do not have that R1 status. That has a lot to do with the fact that we do not have the same resources as many of the other institutions that are bigger, look much different from us, and serve a very different audience than us. So our ability to engage with the likes of the National Science Foundation, all the federal government departments becomes very important. And students, for you, that's important for you because it gives you an opportunity to engage in undergraduate research in a substantive way with best-in-class materials. Third, we need to focus on broadening financial support for our students so they can not only matriculate, but walk across that stage at the end of the day. I want you to think about that for a second. I think all of you know that there have been several tranches of federal allocation from the federal government since COVID began. HBCUs have stepped up in a significant way. More than $50 million in student debt relief led by HBCUs. Why? Because we know that 2/3 of our students are still first-generation college students. And more than 75% of them are from low-resource communities. So our ability to make sure that they matriculate at these institutions in a way that they probably couldn't at the other institutions become important. And the results of that are real. Just ask the likes of Vice President Kamala Harris, or Majority Whip James Clyburn, so many others that have come through the HBCU system, had their life trajectories changed and contributed in a substantive way to the future of our country. And then finally, and I know that there are probably a couple of smaller private HBCUs on the call today, focusing specifically on their needs is important too. Overall, the HBCU community graduates more than 350,000 Black students every year, 350,000. And I know, Brother Jones, like most of our colleagues on the call today, I often get called into the corporate environment and they often say, Tony, we want to hire more Black folks. We want to promote them in the highest levels of government, but we can't find them. Here's my common retort. You are not looking hard enough. There is no way you can tell me that we don't have quality students and alum in every field that matters in this country to move us forward in a substantive way. But it can't just be my voice or Brother Jones' voice. It has to be all of your voices, students. We have to raise our profile in a substantive way. I've said over the last 2 years, the window is pretty wide open for HBCUs at the moment. but it will close. And what we have to do is sow into this moment so that we can not only protect you all right now as you go through your educational experience, but also prepare for generations to come. So I couldn't be more excited that this is happening today, that we are talking in this way about this moment and making sure that we are not only investing in you students, but also requiring you to do more than you might have ever thought possible and to open your hearts and minds in a much different way, not for when you just walk across that stage, but whether it be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you remember where you came from, who your people are, and what's expected of you. I'll leave you with my favorite quote, 1 Corinthians 15:10. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace was with me. But though I labored more abundantly than they all, yet not I, but the grace of God, which was with me. Remember those three words, yet not I, but the grace of God, which was with me. The grace of God is on all of us. I encourage you to open up your hearts, your minds, and the opportunities that will be before you in a substantive way so that the HBCU sector will forever endure. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Allen, for those words of wisdom and encouragement. I don't think we could have started this conference off with better words. And our hope is that the energy that our students have just felt and that us panelists have just felt from Dr. Allen, we carry it on throughout the duration of the summit. Before I transition, I want to see if our NBPLA chairperson, Mr. Gregory Jones, if you have any words you'd like to say to Dr. Allen before he signs off. We know he's a very busy man and working on behalf of Delaware State University and HBCUs across the country. Mr. Jones?
Yes, again, thank you, my new best friend, Dr. Tony Allen, for your well comments. Well received, brother. I really enjoyed that. And you are correct. It can't be just us. We got to create a village telling the world that there are young, professional Black people out there in the world. You just have to look to find them. And we're going to provide that avenue at NBPLA, National Black Professional Lobbyists Association, where they will take the excuse away where we cannot find any Black professional people in the governmental affairs space and policy. So thanks to people like you, Terry, and the panel here, we're going to get that message out and want the world to know that we are here and we're professional and we can do the job. Thank you again, Dr. Allen. God bless you in your new role.
Stay safe and stay connected, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Allen, and thank you, Mr. Jones. Good morning to all of our students. We are so excited to have you today, and we are going to hop right into our program. Before we get started on our first panel, which is entitled Campaigns, Public Policy, and Governmental Affairs, I want to share a couple of things with you. First, this event is sponsored by the National Black Professional Lobbyist Association in partnership with the George Washington University School of Political Management. This event would not be possible without them. And so I would like to play a short video that the school has provided us just to give you all who have an interest in politics a background on what they do. So if you will bear with me, I'm going to share my screen and I will get that played. Okay, everyone should be able to see my screen at this point. And let's go ahead and play this for you all.
There's no place better to study politics than in Washington, D.C. The political management master's degree that we offer at the Graduate School of Political Management is truly bipartisan. We offer the real-world skills that students will be using when they go to work in politics from day one. They'll be designing advertisement, digital media strategies. They'll be putting together campaign plans and advocacy plans. They'll be writing speeches and doing all the types of things they'll need to do on the job on a daily basis.
You will learn how to take the skills and the knowledge in the classroom and apply them, whether you're on Capitol Hill, at a lobbying firm, or at a trade association.
Our faculty are looking to give the types of skills to our students that they look for in their own employees. You're experiencing things on a daily basis that you end up getting to talk about in class and really apply solutions to.
Our project had to figure out how we were going to get the metro in Georgetown, and thinking about how you work through all those political channels. I want them to come out with a mix of being able to be proactive to try to prevent things from happening, and then when they do happen, be able to react to them. It's tangible skills like that that you can go in an interview with and show like, hey, I have some experience in this, is just really invaluable.
We have nearly 5,000 graduates of the Graduate School of Political Management, and more than half of them are working here in the Washington, D.C. area.
These are the ones that will be in the room legislating and advancing policy. They might be the next chiefs of staff. They might be the next staff directors on committees. And by learning and talking with your professors, these are practitioners that have been in the field for decades. They know the levers to pull and how to move things through Washington. I can turn to them whenever I'm dealing with an issue with a client, with a policy, with a legislative agenda, and they can show me and teach me how to advance. These are invaluable assets that every student will have.
Having been a student myself, I loved the classes that I took. I loved the connections that I made. Several of the professors I had are still mentors to me. It was through the career planning and placement that I got my first job. It's definitely had a huge impact on my life.
Whatever the differences are that you're looking to make in the world, an education from the Graduate School of Political Management is going to give you the tools to get you in the room.
Wonderful. All right, without further ado, I've already cut into the first panel. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The first panel is sponsored by Multi-State and Associates, and we are so fortunate to have a representative from Multi-State on this panel. It's entitled Campaigns, Public Policy, and Governmental Affairs. And I'm going to turn the floor over to our esteemed moderator, who is a lobbyist, a reverend, and a professor, among many other things, talents, and skills, Mr. Quadricos Driscoll. Thank you so much for moderating us this morning.
Thank you, Terry, and it's good to be with you all. As Terry said, I'm Quadricos Driscoll. I'm a professor at the George Washington University, the Graduate School of Political Management, where I'm also a graduate, but I am also a graduate of Morehouse College. Friends, I want to center the conversation today because we know that the 117th Congress is the most diverse Congress ever. However, the makeup of the staff, the top staff, doesn't necessarily reflect the rest of America. And in the 117th Congress, we know that the Congressional Black Caucus has a historic 56 members of the United States House of Representatives, as well as the Senate, representing, of course, 82 million Americans, and 25% of the US population for African Americans. The CBC represents almost a fourth of the House Democratic Caucus. Yet and still, when it comes to Hill staffers, when it comes to top officials within the DNC and the RNC, and when it comes to top lobbyists across the country, representation is scarce. And I start with Congress because whether you are thinking about running a campaign, becoming a lobbyist, both at the state and the federal level, in public policy, or even in public affairs and communications, it all starts in politics. And I want to allow the panelists to introduce themselves, although briefly, about who they are and what they do. But first, I think it's incumbent for them to also not only just introduce themselves, but while introducing themselves, describe the critical moments of their narratives. Why did they get involved in public affairs, public policy, government relations? How has their formal education helped them in that process? And what are some of the things they wish they might have done differently now that they are in their careers. And I will start with a very good friend of mine, Remington Belfort.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be on this panel. My name is, as Professor Driscoll mentioned, my name is Remington Belfort. I'm Communications Director for Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, who is the Congresswoman from New York's 9th Congressional District. And she's actually the only Black woman represented in the New York federal delegation. So it is an esteemed pleasure to work with her and her magnificent team. I'm also a graduate, a second generation graduate of the Texas Southern University, where there's excellence and achievement. And I'm also a graduate of the Graduate School of Political Management in the Strategic Public Relations program at George Washington, the George Washington University. I'll be brief. I worked prior to being here in DC. I was studying biology and chemistry at Texas Southern. And after graduation, I started working at a nonprofit organization at the intersection of marginalized communities, pharmaceutical companies, and other patient assistance programs. And one of the things that really jumped out at me was the inability for marginalized and aging communities to be able to navigate the healthcare process. And I met a woman who was very similar to my grandmother in age and stature and disposition. And she had a very strong difficulty in getting her medication paid for. And I thought that could be my grandmother. So I talked to my then chief medical advisor, and she let me know that if I wanted to change healthcare policy, I needed to get to politics. And so I did that, started working on a then candidate, Sylvester Turner, who is now the mayor of Houston. I was fortunate to be encouraged to apply to the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Emerging Leaders Internship, which placed me in DC in my home Congresswoman's office, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. I then stayed there for a number of years where I worked my way up from staff assistant to communications director when I left. During that time, I got my degree in strategic public relations. And I have since shifted from policy to communications because I really admire people's ability to package narratives and deliver them properly to the different audiences. And that specifically speaks to audiences of color, which is why it's important for people who look like us to be in the room, to be at the table, and to be making the decisions. Things I would do differently. I would have more faith in my abilities earlier. I would also speak truth to power when it came to my parents, and I'd probably have a poli-sci degree with a minor in African American studies rather than a biochemistry degree, which I don't necessarily use, but the skill sets are still applicable. And in closing, I would definitely just keep my faith at the forefront of all the things that I was doing so that I knew that I was on the right path. I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I look forward to speaking with you at further.
Thanks, Remington. And I would also encourage the students that as they have questions, particularly during our Q&A session, please put your questions in the chat and raise your virtual hand so that we might give you the virtual microphone to speak. Charlene, if you could briefly describe your narrative and how it has helped you and things you might have done differently.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us. And this is a great panel, first and foremost. My name is Charlene Gale. I have two hats. One hat is I'm a CEO of the Macon Realty, which is a property management and affordable housing development firm. My political hat is I'm the executive director of the New York State Association of Black, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, and Asian legislators. It's New York State's version of the Congressional Black Caucus, where our members consist of all the minority state legislators who are assembly members and senators. How I got involved into politics, which is a very interesting story, is I grew up across the street from Shirley Chisholm. And my family, who is a real estate family, we embrace the term of capitalism. Black capitalism also is an even better terminology. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 didn't just also change social justice for minorities, but it also gave birth to Black capitalism. So I like to encourage others, as well as elected officials, to remind them that, there are Booker T. Washingtons, there are Madam C.J. Walkers still among us. And we have to encourage our young people to be those entrepreneurs, to be those future leaders. And ironically, my father, initially, he's the one who got me involved in politics because he helped campaign his good friend, Mom Una Clark, who gave birth to the beautiful Congresswoman Yvette Clark. So my relationship to elected officials is really organic, and we just really had a good relationship. And now my relationship with these people, they are leaders of New York State, like the Attorney General Tish James, like Congresswoman Yvette Clark, like our new elected mayor, Eric Adams. So what I would tell these young people on the call is that relationships, integrity is so important, because you never know, your colleague could be your next mayor. You know, your supervisor in politics could be your next president. So what I would say, and I would encourage everyone on this call, our young leaders, is, you know, one of my philosophies I like to go by is Maya Angelou. People will forget your name, they forget where you met, but they will never forget how you treated them. So it's important to always walk the line of integrity, respect, and honor. And you're going to encounter so many conundrums within politics. People don't try not to be too over opinionated unless you are asked to discuss policy or legislation, but just maintain your respect, dignity, and integrity.
Thanks, Charlene. Marvin.
Thank you, Quadricus, and thank you to NBPLA and George Washington University for the opportunity to participate today. My name is Marvin Yates, and I am the Director of Strategic Government Relations at Multi-State Associates. We are a full-service state government relations firm here in the Washington, D.C. area. I work with a number of clients to run their state government relations programs, manage contract lobbyists, and actually lobby on behalf of some of those clients at the state level. Been active in all 50 states and have been in this industry for a little over a decade. A little bit about me. I am not an HBCU graduate. I actually went to Michigan State University, where I graduated with my bachelor's in political theory and constitutional democracy. Interestingly enough, I knew since 7th grade that I wanted to go into the political realm. I ran for class president in 7th grade, and from there, I knew that politics was going to be in my future. It wasn't until I started, my dad, very similar to Charlene, my dad had me working on campaigns, going and knocking doors and passing out different things in the community. I'm originally from Detroit and spent years doing that in middle school and early in high school. And that was really, in addition to, me running for class president in 7th grade, what really got me hooked into politics. When I got to high school is when, things kind of went to the next level. I was involved in a program called Youth in Government, and that is a YMCA-based program that has various chapters around the country. And you essentially, as a high school student, you go to your state capital and you take over your state capital. For a week, you are, state representatives, you are state senators, you are lobbyists, and you have that type of experience as if you were actually in the legislature. I did that for 3 years. And then my senior year, I was elected youth governor. That is the highest position that you can have in that youth and government program. And it allowed me to travel the country, come to DC, go to North Carolina and do various conferences. And that's when I realized that, there's much more to politics than just, being class president and helping out with campaigns. At Michigan State, I worked closely with the vice president of government affairs at the university, and I got an opportunity to travel with him multiple times a year to DC to lobby. And then I actually was involved in framing legislation at the state level to actually create a few different programs at the college and university level. And that was my first opportunity in lobbying. From there, had an opportunity after I graduated to go and work for Congressman Sandy Levin on his campaign. And in that role, I saw that public affairs or public service and actually being an elected official was not for me. Having to wake up and go to community breakfast and church meetings at 6 a.m., and then have to do block club meetings at 7 p.m. It was a long day, long hours, and not a lot of money. So for me, I ended up seeing that, really wanting to get into lobbying, it was the direction that I needed to go. Went and worked for a state rep. And then when the Democrats lost the House in Michigan, I had a key decision I needed to make. It was, what do I do? And at that point, I decided to come to DC. Up and left, took a job, and been here about 12 years now. Worked for various trade associations, other government affairs firms, and I've been in this industry and continue to progress ever since I made that move. I would echo Charlene's sentiments as I wrap up here. I think reputation is important. If you are doing things the right way, your name is your brand, and being able to stand on that, goes a long way. So, one of the things that I've been able to do for, my time in this industry is, my name and my reputation are really strong in the industry, and it allows me to continue to make, progress in my career, make connections and grow. So I think that's something really important, and it starts now as you build that brand, that name, and that reputation.
Thanks, Marvin. Last, but certainly not least, Lindsay.
Good morning, and thank you all for having me today. I am a proud HBCU graduate from Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama. I received my bachelor's in computer information systems, and then later went on to the University of Alabama in Birmingham and got an MBA. So I spent 12 years at corporate software, managing software campaigns. But along the way, about 10 years ago, my father, who owns a home improvement company, was looking for a new way to market. So we stumbled upon direct mail. He was helping me get my MBA at the time. So I guess he employed me as his intern. And we learned how effective direct mail could be. I started in politics technically when I was 10 years old, putting yard signs out for my uncle, who was a longtime state legislator. And when he found out we were doing mail, he told me that, you're doing this all wrong. You need to work with people who are trying to get into office. So I started working with politicians, running their direct mail programs. And then people just started to ask me to do more. Well, could you write a radio script? Could you do a video treatment? What other services do you offer? So before long, we had a full-scale campaign shop. And the name of that company is Mac Mail Advertising. We've won 37 races in the last 4 years on the local and state level, and we consult with issue-based campaigns, political campaigns, et cetera. From that sprung a company called CBG Strategies, which is a community engagement and public relations firm based here in Birmingham, Alabama. And simply, we dissolve the space that exists between governments, corporations, nonprofits, and the people that they serve every day. For me, getting into politics was my opportunity to become an entrepreneur. I knew I always wanted to own my own business. I'm a third generation entrepreneur. Politics opened the door for me to not only be an entrepreneur and make money and give other people opportunities, but also a way to change my community. I knew I never wanted to be the president or mayor or governor, but I knew very early on that I wanted to have an impact some sort of way. And I thought about going to law school. I thought about doing all these different things. But sometimes God guides your path. So the quick answer to how I got in this was that one day I was standing downtown Birmingham, and there was a gentleman walking down the sidewalk, and someone said, "Hey, that's your fraternity brother. He just lost a school board race." Well, that gentleman turned out to be your Morehouse brother, Mr. Driscoll, Randall Woodfin. So I ended up working with now Mayor Woodfin on his school board race back in 2013, and we just won the reelect to with this mayor of Birmingham. So that's the way I got in. If I had advice to my younger self, it would be trust yourself and leave corporate America probably 3 years earlier, if I could go back.
So it appears as if the theme that we have heard have been certainly family connections, networking, and connections. And yes, Lindsay, going back to connections, I served under now Mayor Woodfin when we were students. I was on the Honor and Conduct Review Board, to which he was then student body president. So that goes to show you, of course, the power of networking, the power of family connections, and the power of your brand and being ethical in that process. But certainly we know that it is not easy, and it has not been easy being Black, being African-American in this space. So as you all described a little of you all's narrative, now talk to us, talk to our young leaders about some of the challenges you have had being Black in this industry. How did you overcome those challenges? And what choices you made that have been good for your career? And what decisions you wish you would have made differently, but in the context of racism, microaggressions, prejudice? How have you experienced? How have you come over the situation? And we'll start with Marvin.
Sure. I think, I'd start first in college. And I know, a number of our HBCU students, being here represented today understand, there's some challenges that you face, just being a young adult. Being at Michigan State University, I think there are some things that, if you look back, I would have done differently. And one of those things are building connections with your professors. I saw so many of my classmates, so many of my counterparts be able to get internships, job offers directly out of school because they had connections with professors. I think, as a student, use those office hours, use those study groups, use those various opportunities to build genuine relationships outside of the classroom with your professors, because they can really help you. So, when it came time for me to get internships, it was all on me. I had to make all the calls. I had to submit all the applications. I had to do all of the interviews, with no real assistance. And, already being at a university, for me, where the Black population is only 7%, it was really a challenge. So I think one of the things that I faced early on was just, and I know now, to be able to use those connections, use those resources. In addition to that, I think, I had a number of challenges because, when I got into the world of lobbying, really at the state level, there aren't, and even at the federal level, there aren't a lot of people that look like me. So I would go to conferences. There's an organization called NCSL, which is a National Conference of State Legislatures, and they have, anywhere between 5,000 to 10,000 members, at their annual legislative summit. And I may go there, and I may be one of 50 African Americans in a room. And that right there, presented a challenge. And, early in my career, I struggled with, trying to overcompensate. I felt the need to stand out. I felt the need to go over and beyond what was called, because I wanted to make sure people knew who I was and really knew what I could do. But I got to a place where I had to just be me, working hard and doing, what you're good at goes a long way, as opposed to, overexerting yourself and really, trying to overcompensate because you are a minority in some of these rooms, so you really have to be comfortable in who you are, comfortable in your ability, and make sure you show who you are at all times. So, now I go to NCSL and I go to some of these conferences, I go and meet with state legislators. And once again, I'm still one of few in those rooms, but because of who I am, because of the work that I've shown, and the need to, to not, or the lack of, overcompensating, I think goes a long way. And I'm able to, maintain my level and skill set and really represent, for others in that room. So I think, those are some of the things that I've been able to overcome and be able to learn from.
Thanks, Marvin. Lindsay, talk to us about the challenges that you face being Black in this industry and how you perhaps overcame them.
Sure. So the challenges I faced being a minority in this industry are vast. But I'll start here. When you get on campaigns, and the first thing you have to do as a Black business owner on a campaign is establish yourself as a firm. A lot of campaigns, especially statewide campaigns or federal campaigns, when they engage with minority vendors, they want to treat you like a mom and pop type of situation. They don't want to pay the rates that they would pay at a firm that had a similar win list, a similar clientele, and a similar staff. So the same thing that exists in corporate America, which was a big disappointment for me, the same roadblocks that you face in corporate America are going to be the same roadblocks you face in politics. It's just kind of the nature of the beast, unfortunately, in our nation. How I navigated it was that I found a really good mentor, or maybe I should say a mentor found me. You won't get far in this industry without someone who has the experience, the knowledge, and the heart, to be quite honest, to help guide you through it. It just won't happen. So whether it's facing racism, facing, if you got a big contract, but you can't fund it because you don't have access to capital, whatever your issue is, if you have that support system by way of a mentor, that he or she can definitely pave roads for you and get your name in rooms where your feet can't enter yet, as they say. So my mentor for me has probably been, that probably has 100% been the difference between me and some people where we started at the same time, but my firm may be at a slightly different level.
Thanks, Lindsay. Charlene, talk to us about microaggressions, prejudice, bias, you face challenges, and how you certainly overcame them.
Wow, as a Black woman, you have time? Well, first, let me start with the racism I experienced in the real estate world, right? As a Black stakeholder, oftentimes people believe, why do you own so much? You should be home with the kids. How does a woman own her own business? Now let's segue that to politics. Like what Lindsay said, having a mentor is huge. My mentor is Dr. Una Clark, Congresswoman Yvette Clark's mom. She was the first Caribbean elected official in New York City. So in New York City, it's not so much racism in politics as it is class racism among Black people themselves. That does happen. And what Mom Clark does, she likes to embrace everyone. So what, she talks with an accent. So what, people have different dialects. At the end of the day, we are all could work together. And you'd be so surprised how racism, classism, sexism exists within the Black community. And that could divide the Democratic Party in itself. It is imperative to have those leaders, those community leaders, the pillars in politics, to try to galvanize them to come together to really work collectively on one movement. So it's not just racism as in Black, white, it's also racism within our own group that you young leaders will face.
Thanks, Charlene, for bringing up the very important other isms that we unfortunately experience. Remington.
Well, definitely briefly, coming from the South, there is this respectability politics that is rampant in what I consider like the upbringing of young Black aspiring politicals and aspiring professionals. You're taught to address a certain way, you're taught to speak a certain way and present yourself a certain way so as not to offend. And I think that truly is utilized and weaponized as a way to control and to castigate young Black aspiring politicals and professionals. But I think one of the things that I've learned is how to utilize that as a mechanism for my advancement. So if I can utilize my my suit as a defense mechanism, it can also be utilized as a mechanism and an opportunity for networking and an opportunity for people to see something that they otherwise had not always seen. And so I take pride in my presentation. That's one of the things I learned at an HBCU, right? They can say something about you, but if you define who you are in the way in which you present yourself and the work that you deliver, it matters not what they say about you, it matters what you've done and what you deliver. I think also one of the things that I learned coming up in the South is to understand the importance of community and to not isolate yourself. Because oftentimes the journey that we're on is not something that we're not trailblazing a journey. We're advancing and furthering a journey that our predecessors had, paved the way for us. And oftentimes we think because we're doing this in our mind as first, we should do this alone. And as Lindsay said, if you don't have someone who's willing to advocate on your behalf, to point you in that direction, to support you on your journey, oftentimes you'll go the wrong path and you'll go around in circles and unnecessarily. And so I learned that like community is important. And if you want to go far, you must go with people. And if you want to go fast, which is oftentimes the wrong direction, you can go alone.
Thank you, Remington. So friends, we've discussed what has inspired us to get involved in politics and lobbying and communications and public affairs. We've discussed even some of the challenges around that we might have experienced. But let's now talk a little bit about the future, right? You all, the young students, the young leaders that are in this space. So to the panelists, couple questions. What advice would you give these young, inspiring leaders, particularly in the racial awakening that we've experienced in 2020 as well as in 2021? What would you encourage these young Black students to learn? How would you get them to start thinking about their career paths in politics and public policy and in government relations? Some of that to which you've already mentioned, the importance, of course, of mentorship. And I think most importantly, and this needs to be asked because so often we don't think about the economic aspect within politics. What's the best way to earn money and to grow your wealth while working in public service? And I will start with Remington.
Well, so the first advice I would give is from my favorite author and masterful wielder of words, the Toni Morrison. She says, when you get these jobs that you're so brilliantly trained for, be sure to carry someone with you. And I'll amend that to include an excerpt from the late, great Honorable Shirley Anita St. Hill Chisholm. And she said, if you're not invited to the table, make sure you bring a folding chair, right? And I'll add a bit more on from the Honorable Mother Una Clark, who said, we can do all things through community, right? And I think that that's something I want everyone to understand is that you must carry someone with you. You must be willing to ensure that the next generation or the next opportunity or the next person has an opportunity through you. And that community is the most important. I will say that on the next question, earning additional funds through public service is difficult. You have to find your niche. I wear a wristband every day that says my dream chose me, because oftentimes we're so interested in what other people are deciding for us or what future other people have for us that we forget that there's a calling on our lives, right? So I'm a man of faith and I believe that greater is he that's within me than he that's within the world, right? And so oftentimes we have to realize that we have to trust ourselves and God will align our paths so that we encounter people who will support us on our journey, because the steps of a good man or woman are ordered. And once you identify that niche, exist in integrity and deliver excellence, because once you start doing that, people will take heed. Your gift will make a way for you, right? And when you are there and when you make your way as GSPM, as we say at the Graduate School of Political Management, when you're in the room, make sure you bring someone with you. Make sure you take comprehensive notes, so when that next person is interested in being in that space or something similar, you can be a conduit of knowledge and experience. You can be a supporter of the next generation. And also make sure that you understand what things are within your purview, what things are not within your purview, what things are in your sphere of influence, what things are not within your sphere of influence. And one of my favorite books, and I'll end on this, is the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in mind. Write things down and start at the end. What is it that I'm trying to do? Where am I trying to get? What does ultimate success look like, right? And work your way back. And oftentimes you're not going to have the direct map and things are going to change. Your A may look like a C sometimes and your D may look like a Z. But oftentimes, if you write it down, it's easier to backtrack and it's easier to map. And so utilize that as a mechanism in your toolbox and listen to the people around you. And I'm gonna reiterate what I said earlier. When you get these jobs that you're so brilliantly trained for, make sure that you bring someone with you. Toni Morrison was a masterful wielder of words, and that's one of the things that really resonates with me, because we have to remember that we have to provide for the next generation. We have to do better and our best so that the next generation who sees us can be empowered, inspired, and supported by our actions.
Amen. Thank you, Remington. Lindsay.
So the most important thing I can share is to not discount your life experiences. As African Americans, we have a life experience that uniquely qualifies us to communicate with, persuade and engage with the people that look like us. And don't sell that for pennies because it's invaluable. Black people, especially Black women, are the backbone of the Democratic Party, right? I grew up with a Black mother, a Black grandmother, Black sisters. I went to my kindergarten through college. I went to Black schools. It's not a lot you can tell me about Black people and how we think and how we engage. I took that. There's no education that I could have paid for to prepare me for that, but I take that with me when I run campaigns, be them political or issue-based. I'll say this too, as a Black professional, whether you're a consultant or if you're in the official side, no matter where you are, people are going to try to pigeonhole you into, well, can you just communicate with the other minorities for us? Don't run from that, exploit it. Right? Because what that develops is a niche. And if you have a niche, you can then have a business. If you have a business, you can then make money. So don't run from who you are, embrace it. That's probably the biggest thing that I've done and when made my way successful. In terms of being able to make money while you're doing public service, I look at elected officials, chief of staff, people like that, even myself to a degree. We're like professional athletes. We're young, we're fast, we can play ball right now, but those knees are gonna wear down over time. So you need to set up something, if it's real estate or some other business, some other revenue stream so that you can live comfortably. And all the network that you're building while you're there, don't abandon it. Like Christmas cards are a big deal. Keep people top of mind because you never know what route you may need to go down. So that would be my advice.
Thanks, Lindsay. Charlene.
Hi, so, wow, good question. Economic power is the key to success. Business is means to that power. Ownership ensures that you keep that power. I would say that ownership, preservation of legacy is so imperative. It's interesting how on this panel, Marvin, Lindsay, and Remington, we all could relate to leaders within our family who helped get us where we are. It's one of the books I would definitely recommend. One of my favorite books, who's also was a friend of my father, is How to Succeed in Business Without Being White by Earl Graves. It teaches you that you cannot sit back and rely on government for charity. We don't want, charity or just handouts. What we want is access to capital. What we want is ownership. What we want is preservation. What we want is health and wealth and legacy. We want to continue this platform increase, not just for us, not just for these students, but for their children and their children thereafter. The only way we ensure wealth is through ownership. The only way we ensure ownership is to make sure our elected officials know the importance of our small business owners. Just like Marvin, I have no interest in being an elected official. I can't kiss babies. I can't go to cookouts. I can't go to fish fry. But guess what I can do? I could empower those elected officials that I believe in us. So what I would say to these young people, whether you want to be in politics as an elected official, whether you want to be behind those elected officials for fundraisers, whether you want to be a lobbyist to create and enhance policies, whatever you do, just have a plan. Have a plan of ownership. Have a plan of wealth building. Have a plan of development, not just for you, but for others around you. You can't eat at the table by yourself. You got to make sure everyone around you eat as well.
Words to live by, Charlene. Last but not least, Marvin.
Thank you. There's a number of things, going last after answering the question is tough. There's a lot of things I think, I could echo that others have already mentioned, but I think I'm going to kind of take it in a different direction. I think everybody said, pull somebody up, it's all about community, help each other out. You have to get in the door first. It's hard to help others if you're not even there. So I think one of the things, and this, I hate the word, I don't really like the idea of grind, but that's what it is. Like you right now, like you have to put time, effort, energy, hard work, and this is a grind. I don't think anybody on this panel got to where they are, with handouts or, just by, luck of the draw. It's hard work. I think one of the books that I really enjoy, one of my colleagues recommended that our entire office read it last year. It's a book called Range. And this compares the idea of Tiger Woods to Roger Federer, the idea of specialization versus variety. Tiger Woods grew up knowing what he was going to do. He was going to be a golfer. Roger Federer, on the other hand, he did everything. He played baseball, he played basketball, but ultimately he ended up being a tennis player. The idea behind that is the fact that, there's more than one way to skin a cat. You can become professional at something and you don't necessarily have to take a straight and direct route. You can try different things out. You can learn and see what you like and see what sticks. In my career, I've done it all. I've worked on campaigns. I worked for elected officials. I've worked on various issues, tax related, retail, entertainment, sports, all in the policy space. But for me, I found out what makes sense and what I like to do by having that variety. So I think, as you grind, as you work hard, as you push yourself to find that direction, be willing to try out a lot of different things. Another thing that's important to me, and I believe in the law of attraction. I think a lot of people talk about, and money and economics is very important, but at the same time, I work and I live my life understanding that the things that I put out there will come back to me. So if I started where I started in my career, 10, almost 15 years ago, of course, I'm a lot further, at this point. And it comes because I did the things, I did the work, and I put that positive energy out there and it came back to me, economics and, monetary gain, as far as just benefits in life, so I think, that positive energy, releasing that positive energy into the world, putting those positive, things out there, I think go a long way to bring and see that positive and benefit in your life. So, as you all continue to matriculate through the university, as you start, your first job out of college, put that positive energy out there and work hard. And I think it'll come back to you. I see so many people in DC, you have 5, 6 people that are, living in an apartment because they're working on the Hill, and, they're working at bars and restaurants to make ends meet. You can do that. But at the same time, if you work hard, if you grind, if you put the time, the energy, the effort into it, it'll come back fourfold. So I think, that's something to take away.
Thanks, Marvin. Thank you all. To the students, I want to continue to encourage you to place your questions in the chat or to raise your virtual hand. Certainly, if we were in person as a professor, I would call on you. I don't have that luxury. So do not be bashful, ask questions. To which we have our first question from Khadijah Bryant, who is a recent graduate of the Clark Atlanta University. Shout out to the Atlanta University Center, where she's also the student body president at the graduate level. Her question is, If children were taught in middle school and high school policymaking on a state, local, and federal level, in addition to math and reading, would there be more representation than it is now? And the importance behind using your voice to advocate for change. Who among us wants to take that question on?
I mean, I'll grab it real quick because I will say that oftentimes we're taught the only way to a lucrative career is in engineering, going to law school, being a doctor, or getting a business degree, right? And I think that's because the limited frame that is presented to us and our parents is fairly continuous from 1970 and prior, right? And so I think it would definitely dramatically increase. Like Marvin said, he was in 7th grade wanting to be in politics because he had the pleasure of knowing what politics meant and the interworkings, and Lindsay as well, and Charlene as well, right? I didn't have that luxury. My mom was a pharmacist, and while my mother taught me the importance of hard work, it was, you need to be a doctor because that's lucrative. That's firm foundation. That is a job for the rest of your life where you can take care of yourself, and when I get older, you can take care of me, right? And then we can also do this a clinic where I'll have the pharmacy and you can be the doctor, and it's a family dream, the family business. And I think oftentimes when I was studying and things weren't clicking, and while I didn't do the best that I could all the time, I did work hard during that degree. And I think that my tools might have been went further and went a different direction if I was able to see like, oh, I like people. I like being able to construct things and relay things in a way in which they're consumable, right? And that to me is helping folks. And so I think if people were taught at a younger age, I think the only time I was ever taught anything policy was like my senior year when I took government and econ. And that was like literally half a semester for each one. And I was in AP English all the way through high school, AP Science, AP Math, right? Like making sure that I knew how to like navigate on the normal levels that are expected of us in the standardized testing. And I'll quickly say that my pops always says, if you ask a monkey, a horse, a fish, and a tiger how to climb a tree, a monkey's gonna seem like the genius, right? But a monkey will sink and a fish will swim, right? A tiger eats monkey meat, right? It's not about what people define intellect as, it's about what you're special at. And I think if we teach our kids younger about things that are alternative to the traditional expectations of standardized testing and standardized intelligence, that we'll have a broader experience and a broader sphere of people to select from an earlier age.
Thanks, Remington. And unless someone else wants to tack on that question, I do have a question for the panelists while our students sort of think about their questions. A theme that certainly we heard was the influence of some family connection that inspired us, myself included, actually, to get involved in politics, government relations, or if it wasn't a family, it was good mentorship. We know that the majority of students who graduate from historically Black colleges and universities are often the first generation. So what would you all say to perhaps that student who may not have had professional parents or the encouragement of a mentor? What would you say about that student who is grinding, who's doing the best that he, she, or they can, but may not have guidance? What advice would you give to them as they're thinking about a career in politics, government relations policy?
May I answer that question?
You may, Charlene.
Thank you. So at the, I'm glad you brought that up. At the New York State Association of Black Puerto Rican Legislators, one of the programs that we created is called Tomorrow's Leaders, because a lot of time minority graduates do not have the nepotism that other white graduates may have. You know, their fathers are not part of a country club to offer them that support. So what I would say is that if you could students should reach out to maybe their community pillars, find organizations like the YMCA, find youth leaderships within their communities, within their sororities, within their fraternities, You know, there's a lot of nonprofit groups that's really trying to reach out to young Black professionals, whether they're deciding to go into government policies, whether they want to go into legislation, whether they want to go into the private sector. There's a lot of organization, especially after this BLM movement. You'd be surprised of so many humanitarian groups that woke up and said, oh, wait a minute, yes, we have a responsibility. So what I would tell these young students is do your due diligence, do your research and development, but there's a lot of organizations who are anxious and who also got those federal dollars to help.
Thanks, Charlene.
Start talking about stuff like that. I'm sorry, you start getting me emotional now.
So,
Quadricus, you mind if I?
I'm sorry, Marvin, but Elijah Crawford, and I want to get into many questions as possible. Elijah Crawford from Southern University, who's majoring actually in political science. He asked the question, what advice do you have for students interested in public policy lobbying, but don't necessarily have a lot of experience in the field? What is the first step?
So I'll answer that. And, you know, I was one of those students, just to be honest, when I got ready to graduate, I was applying for jobs that I knew I didn't qualify for. I remember like it was yesterday, I applied for a job. It was the director of government relations at Comcast. I was I went to Michigan State in East Lansing. The job was in Lansing, you know, and I was like, hey, I want to go into government relations. Let me apply. It was like 10 years of experience. I actually made it to the third round of interviews, and I don't know how, you know, being as though I was just getting ready to graduate from college. You know, so one of the things that I realized is the fact that you have to build that resume. You know, a lot of that building of the resume is going to be, you know, policy jobs that aren't directly lobbying. You know, they're going to be, you know, policy analyst, legislative assistant. Like, they're going to be different types of jobs where you're gaining valuable skills to be able to, you know, catapult you into the lobbying industry and into that field. You know, I think it goes a long way. And I think the panel has done a great job talking about, you know, mentorship and things like that. But, you know, I like to tell you guys, seek and you will find. You know, seek different opportunities, seek different experiences. They're out there, and you'll have the opportunity to build that resume, build that war chest of experiences that can actually help you get into the industry. I know I have, you know, white counterparts who, you know, have half the experience that I have, but have been able to get into the industry a lot quicker. You know, but they have, you know, some of them have advanced degrees and different things like that. So there are various paths that you can take. You know, you can go and get a master's of public administration. You can go get a master's of public policy, or, you know, get a law degree, and it may help, but it really just is based on, you know, what you want to do. If you want to continue education, you know, there's a way that you can continue education, and then that can help in that career or getting into the lobbying field. Or, like I said, it's just about building those experiences, building that resume, and those various duties, tasks, assignments, and roles that actually prepare you to go into lobbying. Lobbying is about relationships. You know, lobbying is really about building relationships, cultivating relationships, and, you know, but the policy side of that is also a really important and key part of lobbying that you can get from various roles before you're actually getting to the lobbying industry.
And I would just add to that, taking moderator's privilege, starting out in the legislative body, whether it's in the General Assembly of your state, whether it's having an internship on Capitol Hill, working in the legislative process, in the legislative affairs process, is the easiest way to get involved in lobbying. However, it is not the only way, as Marvin said. There are multiple ways. So you have to sort of find, and part of that is exploring what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what is good at, what you like, what you don't like, to get as many experience as you possibly can. I started out campaigning. I started out working on campaigns, realized I didn't like the campaigning side, started out as a Hill staffer, knew I didn't want to get into government relations. Lastly, friends, I want to encourage the panelists to put your contact information, whether that is social media or your email address, in the chat. So that way, if students have questions, that they can reach you at offline and have a conversation about. So if you could just please put your information, whether that is your email address, phone number, or social media communications, in the chat, that would be helpful. We have about 3 more minutes. And so I want to, again, encourage the students that if they have any questions, please, please, please do not hesitate to ask.
I just want to pop in on something that Marvin said real quick about having a job and having multiple roommates and things like that, to just add an air of just truth to it. Let's be clear. When I first got here, I had 3 roommates. I was working on Capitol Hill, plus I was working at J. Crew and Cole Hine, right? And I'm gonna tell y'all, get you a job that can like apply to your full-time job, right? I wasn't trying to work in no restaurant, because how did that apply to me? But guess what? J. Crew had sales, and that on top of my discount meant I can afford a suit, right? Cole Hine meant, oh, yo, I could be fresh in my shoes looking like, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries on a budget, you know what I mean? And so, and don't look down at where you are, because it's important. Like the people that I was roommates with, we still rock, we still rolling constantly, right? So do what you need to do to get where you need to go, because at the end of the day, that's gonna be where your strength is built, right? Diamonds not built from a pat, they built from pressure.
Thanks, Remington. And there's one last question again from Elijah Crawford. He says, when it comes to lobbying and legislation, do you all feel that a graduate degree is necessary to secure economic security?
I'll start. No, and I'm just being honest. I got accepted out of college to a few master's programs and thought about doing graduate school, and ultimately continued to kind of push the decision off. But once again, I was able to build that resume, build my experiences where I didn't need it. Could it have helped me? Possibly, but at the end of the day, I think everybody's paths are different. If you're somebody that, that really enjoys school, that, has an interest in even law school, graduate school, I think it just depends on your preference. But for me, I realized that my resume was pretty strong, and I had built up enough experience where a degree or any type of, furthering my education wasn't necessary. I have a number of certificates, public speaking certificates, other, government relations, lobbying based certificates, and those type of experiences, from a furthering my education standpoint, I think those help. But I think it really just depends on your experiences. Like I said, 10 years for me, and I have not needed a degree or a graduate degree or a law degree. So it really just depends on you. Law degrees too, I don't want to knock any lawyers on this panel, but the challenge with a law degree is, the return on investment. If you're going to, go to law school, if nobody's going to pay for it, if you're coming out of pocket, taking out loans to cover law school, understanding that, you want to make sure that you're able to get that return on your investment. A junior level associate and what they bring in compared to actually going in and doing something other than actually practicing can present some challenges on that return on investment. So if you're thinking about law school, those are some of the decisions that I had to make. But yeah, like I said, for me, I didn't need another degree, and I think, it worked out in my favor.
Lastly, friends, I would just echo what Marvin has said. I think it is all contingent on what's in your best interest. Certainly on this panel, there are those of us who have graduate degrees. You might want to look for programs like the Graduate School of Political Management at GW that helps in terms of combining theory as well as practice. But certificate programs, which again, GW does have, also helps, where you don't necessarily have to get a full degree. But nothing counts more than experience plus theory. It's the practical education as well as the theoretical education that would make you that much more excellent and powerful in the field. Friends, at this point, I thank you all for joining. I thank my illustrious panelists, and I would turn it back over to the coordinator, Terry Reynolds.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful panel. There's so much wisdom, so much knowledge, so much experience on this panel. And I've gotten to know all these panelists over the course of the last few weeks. So on behalf of the National Black Professional Lobbyists Association and the George Washington Graduate School of Political Management, thank you so much for your time and participation. Students, you should have just received another email link to the next panel that will start promptly at 10:45 a.m. Central Standard Time, 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time. So we look forward to seeing you all there. If you have any questions or you want to follow up, you can reach me at Terry, Terri, at nbpla.org. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you soon.